And man, I don't know what to say here, but I'm from here. If any of y'all don't know me, I sobered up here in '06 and moved to Nacogdoches, Texas, here just a couple of years ago. And right at first, I was having a really hard time because I got there and I realized they just don't do AA right over there. And so I was struggling with it quite a bit, and I realized, I was like, I need a sponsor. You know, I'm over here in a foreign land, and I need to find a sponsor. And so I was, just meeting people and all this kind of thing, and I'd met Ricky a couple of times, and you meet somebody in AA, and they are how you expect them to be in AA, and happy, joyous, and free, and all that stuff, and I've heard a lot through the years that you find somebody who has what you want. And in my mind, I kind of changed that to find somebody who is how you want to be. And this guy was how I wanted to be. And I ended up, running into him, having a little business thing outside of AA. And he was exactly the same way. Happy, joyous, and free and on fire, not just about being in the rooms of AA, but just about living life. And that's what I want. And so, without taking up any more of his time, and he's just been a tremendous help to me, even if he doesn't think so sometimes. But Ricky.
Thank you, Carter. I'm Ricky Russell, and I'm an alcoholic. And by the grace of God and a good cardiologist, I made it over here. Last week it was kind of iffy. And by the way, I hadn't had a drink since August 20th, 1990. Last week was kind of dicey. I've had quadruple bypass surgery 13 years ago and a stent put in 3 years ago. And I know the symptoms, and I had the symptoms. I got asked to speak at Blackstone retreat in Virginia, which is like, I could not believe they asked me to talk there. I mean, they have a podium there that Sam Shoemaker spoke at that podium, Father Martin, and all these people, and there's a bunch of guys there with over 50 years, and I felt like a newcomer, with 35 years. But I was really looking for it, and my wife was going, and my wife never goes to hear me talk unless it's some vacation spot or, something really pretty, because she probably laughs if she hears me talk about being spiritual. But there's some guys I sponsor, and their wives were going, and there was a bunch of us going, and man, I really wanted to go. My sponsor was going to be there. He spoke here Sunday morning last year, Gary Kincaid, and he said to tell you guys hello. But so I get with the cardiologist, and I said, hey, I'm having the symptoms. And they said, well, come on in. So I go in, they do a stress test and an echo, and everything looks great, but I still had the symptoms. So I go back to the cardiologist, and the PA saw me. This was about 2 weeks ago. And he said, I'm going to put you on this medication. It's like a nitroglycerin timed release that will dilate your blood vessels, and maybe that'll help you. And if you're still having symptoms in 2 weeks, you call and we'll get you in and do a heart cath. So I'm thinking, man, I could have a heart attack on the plane, at the podium, somewhere in Virginia. And I never pray for myself. But a week ago Monday, we're leaving on Thursday, and a week ago Monday, I'm on my way to work, and I always say a prayer every morning on the way to work. God, help me to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Show me what I can do for the man who's still sick. Help me to forget about how much money I'm going to make or not make. Help me to help a customer solve a problem. Help me to forget about when I'm going to get off and what my plans are. Just help me to do for anyone but me. And that's usually pretty much my prayer, but on the way to work Monday morning, I said, God, I really want to go to Virginia. And I don't know what I said after that, but I get to the shop, and about an hour later, the PA calls. And this is only like about 4 days after he had seen me. And he said, I was going through some notes and I saw your name and I thought I'd call and see how you were doing. I said, well, I'm still having the symptoms. He said, we need to get you in for a heart cath. And I said, I agree. I said, but look, I've got this trip planned to Virginia Thursday through Sunday, and I really don't want to miss it. He said, we can't get you in before then anyway. He said, I'll have Kelly call you, and she sets up the heart cath. I said, okay. About 20 minutes, Kelly called me, and she said, we've got a slot in the morning at 10. Can you be here? I said, you bet. So I go in there, and they put 2 stents in my heart. Well, you cannot travel for 48 hours after you've had stents put in. My flight was leaving to go to Baltimore 48 hours later. And of course, I'm thinking, what a coincidence. Look how all this lined up, you know. No, that was God, you know. And like I told him out there, I don't believe in the parking spot God, but I believe in the Blackstone God. But yeah, I'm fortunate. I'm really glad to be here. I'm going to talk about sponsorship. And that's I would say for me, it's the most important component in my recovery. Because I needed a CNI dog in this deal, you know. I have a fantastic family. I've got 4 grown kids that love me. We have no friction among any of us. As a matter of fact, my daughter, she lives west of Fort Worth. Her and her husband have a B&B, whatever you call those. And my daughter has a big book on the shelf in case someone stays there and may have a problem. My youngest son told my wife about 3 or 4 years ago, he's got little 3 stair-step boys. And he said, Mom, he said, I want to raise my kids exactly like you and Dad raised us. And I thought, oh my God, you know, what a compliment. Super Dad. And now a few days later I realized, no, that's not a compliment to me. That's a compliment to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a real compliment to my sponsor, because he's the one that showed me this stuff on how to be a husband, how to be a father. And, you know, there's a lot of myths. Gosh, I can't remember. I'm horrible with names. Glenda talked about some of the myths. And, you know, there's one, I don't know if you hear it over here or not, but I used to hear it all the time where I lived. If you got a financial problem or a marital problem, don't you go to an alcoholic for that. Well, I guess they don't read the book I read, Alcoholics Anonymous. Because if you read Working with Others, it doesn't even talk about taking someone through the steps. It says, having had the experience yourself, you can give him much practical advice. And it talks about being broke or homeless. And right after that, on the bottom page 98, it says, there may be divorce, separation, or just strained relations. That's one of the first areas I'm supposed to help the guy I sponsor with. Because it says later on in the family afterward that he's not likely to get far in any direction if he doesn't show love and unselfishness under his own roof. So if I'm sponsoring a guy that's got a wife or a relationship or whatever, we're fixing to get to work on that. Now, I'm not going to be a marriage counselor with him. I'm going to have him do some things. Would you believe that sponsorship, me sponsoring someone else, would change my marriage? It does, and here's how it changes. You know, I sponsor a guy named Zane, and they're having trouble. You know, he's a newcomer. I said, Zane, you go home and you do the dishes, and you expect absolutely nothing in return from your wife. You start vacuuming, you start doing things to help her have a better day, and expect nothing in return. And that changes his marriage, but guess what? I get home, and guess what's in the sink? There's dishes. So am I going to talk about this, or am I going to practice what I'm telling these guys to do? So I wash the dishes, and it improves my marriage too. You know, I've got a fantastic marriage today. I mean, and it was one of the worst in the world. I want to thank the committee for inviting me to this deal. I love doing this sponsorship deal much more than I like standing here talking about my story, because I hear the results of people that start doing this. And I want to thank Jennifer for inviting me. And who else was it? Maurice. He has called and checked on me. And then Roger, who was my host, that's not here. No, something came up. Hey, Carter, will you throw me that bottle of water? And then if you guys don't buy any tapes, or, well, he don't have tapes. He's got CDs or a flash drive. Buy something, because these are the guys that carry our history, through the years. And, what Glenda said last night and what you hear could be two completely different things. I've seen that happen over and over and over. What I say and what someone hears. I mean, I love how God is anonymous. I've had people literally come up to me and say, man, you told me something and it literally changed my life. And I'll say, what is that? And they tell me what I said, and I never said that, So that's God being anonymous, and it's God, checking my ego a little bit. But this actually happened about 3 months ago. I drove down to Austin to talk. That was goofy on my part. I forgot my pants. I went down there with golf shorts and flip-flops on and my clothes hanging, and I forgot my pants. So I spoke in a coat and tie, pair of shorts and flip-flops. But I told this story about giving my wife a B12 shot. 2 days later, a friend of mine from down there named Jackie, who spoke here last year, Jackie called me and he said, a guy in our group called me up and he said, I can't believe Ricky was talking about his wife being a Beach 12. He said, he didn't say that. He said, yeah, man, he was at the podium and he talked about his wife being a Beach 12. And Jackie thought about it. He said, man, he didn't say that. He was talking about her taking B12, So that's how it can get screwed up, what we say and what someone hears, You might could have called her that at one time, but not anymore. Anyway, the gumbo was fantastic, but please get some tapes from James and them. James works hard at this deal. I've known James for a long, long time, and he's got some of the best recordings there are. Where's Shelley at? Hey, Shelley. Shelley did a fantastic job this morning on the sponsorship deal, and I love Sammy's talk too. And I told Sammy one of these little coincidences. I'm 26 days younger than Sammy. He's married 40 years. 2 weeks from today, I'll be married 40 years. My dad died on my sister's birthday. This is his 41st AA birthday. If my dad hadn't drank himself to death at 51 years old, he would be 89 years old today. So, isn't that weird? Anyway, I'm looking forward to the rest of this, but I'll tell you how this sponsorship deal started. Anybody that's sober in here, like Sammy, Shelley, different ones, once you're sober 25 or 30 years, you have guys come to you that are 10, 15, 20 years and ask you to sponsor them. And come to find out, some of them have never sponsored anyone, or no one's ever stayed sober that they sponsored. And so I can be a little, what would you call it, Shelley? Overbearing or a little forceful sometimes. And I told the guys that I sponsor, I said, hey, we're going to have a sponsorship workshop. And I gave them a date like 4 months away. And I said, you cancel everything else you got, but you're going to be there for that. And you tell the guys you sponsor to be there, and so on. So we had, I think there were 37 of us that got together. But I wanted to come up with something on paper, because what I say and what they hear is two different things. And so I worked on it for 3 or 4 months on just how to take someone through the steps. And it's simple, simple, simple. And once I got done, I sent it to some of these AA big book enthusiasts or big book thumpers, whatever you want to call them. And I said, I don't want any attaboys. I want you to rip this thing apart. You tell me what's wrong with it. And nobody could find anything wrong with it. So, anyway, Bill Wilson said back in 1941, he said, our chief responsibility to the newcomer is an adequate presentation of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's my role as a sponsor. That's my role as an AA member at a meeting. And, I'm not there to talk about how my day went. I'm there to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Someone brand new can come to our meeting and we'll say, well, let's talk about how we got here. And that newcomer's going to hear about drinking alcohol and consequences, drinking alcohol and consequences. And he can do that for 90 straight meetings and hear the same thing, and he's still not going to know what's wrong with him. I need to know what is wrong with me. I need to know what the problem is, and it's not drinking alcohol. That's a symptom of it. So the goal of this presentation is to replicate what the founders did with the same sense of urgency. And with the exception of making amends, Bill did the steps while he was in the hospital, and Bill was hospitalized for 7 days. This doesn't take long at all. Raise your hand over here, Jonathan. I met with Jonathan, and this is usually the way it goes. Jonathan asked me to sponsor him. Jonathan had already identified he wasn't vibrating, so we set up a time to meet. I think it was a Tuesday. And we sat down at 5 o'clock, and we're not racing at all. But when we got done, he was ready to go do a 4-step, and it had been an hour and 50 minutes. It just doesn't take long. I did this, a guy sponsor in Jackson, Mississippi asked me if I'd come do a workshop over there. And I knew there was a hunger for sponsorship, and I know a lot of people, there's some in here right now, I promise you, they're intimidated by the idea of sponsoring someone. Probably everyone is before they've ever done it. I was afraid that, man, if I say the wrong word, it'll kill them, you know. Gary, my sponsor, said, you're going to kill the first 5 or 6, so just go ahead and get started, you know. So the guy in Mississippi, he said, man, he said, there may not be 20 people show up. I said, I don't care if there's 5 people that show up. If someone gets something out of it, you know, I don't mind coming over there. And we get there, and they had to go get chairs for another building. There was 92 people that showed up for this sponsorship workshop, and none of them knew me. So it was not my personality. It wasn't like, Bill Wilson was coming or anything. None of them knew who I was, but they had a hunger for sponsorship. So the sponsorship is usually about 3 hours long. I'm going to kind of briefly go through some of the stuff. It won't be 3 hours today. And I got done, and I get these emails from people. And there was a girl there that had 8 years, and she was afraid to sponsor. She sends me this email. She said, I'm no longer intimidated by the idea of sponsoring someone. I'm ready to go get a newcomer and get busy. 2 years later, she sends me a picture on Facebook Messenger. It's her and 11 girls in her house. She said, this is the big book study we do once a week, and these are the girls I sponsor and the ones they sponsor. And I'm sitting in my recliner. I started crying. Tears are running down my face. So it's really, really meaningful for me doing this versus standing up and sharing my story. So there are 2 nights that I'm home all the time. You know, I'm married. I can't be in AA 24 hours a day. I mean, I have to slow myself down from AA. I can't get enough of AA. I've loved it ever since I got here. But Tuesday and Thursday, I'm at home with my wife. And my wife's weird. She goes to bed at 7:30. And I think you should go to bed like 12 or 1, you know. And nothing's on TV on this Tuesday night. And I thought, well, I'll find a Zoom meeting. And I found it just as easy to sponsor someone on Zoom. And I know there's the Zoom detractors, and they'll say, well, Zoom just doesn't do it for me. What do you mean do it for you? I'm not on there to do it for me. Are there new people on there? That's all I need to know. And I've sponsored guys. We started a Zoom meeting. I mean, I could go on and on about the people that got sober on those Zoom meetings that now have 5 years of sobriety and are doing well. So I get on this meeting on a Tuesday night. I found one. It was a big book newcomers meeting. Interesting. So I get on there. And a guy asked me, in the chat, asked me for my number. So I gave him my number. And he called me the next day. He said, hey, will you sponsor me? And I said, yeah. Have you got a couple of hours? He said, yeah. He lives in Long Island, New York. And so we get on Zoom. And I did just like I did with Jonathan. We spent about 2 hours. And he's ready to do his 4-step. And he takes a train every day to Manhattan. He's in the construction business. Been doing it for 30 years. He's one of the bosses now. And the peons, they go home on Friday at noon. And he's just there in his office Friday afternoon. He knocks out his 4-step. Sunday, we get on Zoom, do his 5th step. The next week, he's out making amends. The guy's doing well. He's sponsoring guys. He's chairing meetings up there. I told him about this men's dogwood retreat we do over in East Texas. He said, that sounds interesting. So So I send him the flyer on it. About 3 days later, he sends me his flight itinerary. He flies to Love Field. I go pick him up. He comes to our men's retreat. You know, it just doesn't take long. What I didn't know, you know, one of the things when I pray, God, help me to grow in understanding and effectiveness, I think that's what's led me to the history of Alcoholics Anonymous and to learn more about it. And I didn't know this if you're new. It may kind of look weird the way it reads, but the big book was written to be mailed out because there wasn't AA everywhere. So if you're in Shreveport, Louisiana, and maybe you read the Saturday Evening Post or you heard about Alcoholics Anonymous and you ordered the book, Bill wrote the book in a manner where you could take the book and follow the instructions and recover from alcoholism. So that's why when you read the book, you see so many things that are repeated. It's so redundant. A lot of things are repeated 3 times in the big book. But he had to do that for that new guy that he wanted to make sure he understood this stuff all the way through. Nowadays, the guy don't take the big book and recover from him just using the big book. We carry the message to him. So if I'm sponsoring someone like Jonathan here, I'm not going to tell him read the book. I mean, I want him to read it, but I don't care if he's read the book or not. That's one thing, one place I differ with Bill and here's why. And working with others, he says, lend him your copy of this book. Well, he didn't have any experience of doing that because there wasn't a book to lend when he wrote that. Here's what I figured. By then, Bill knew that if you loaned something to a drunk, you wasn't ever getting it back, so he's going to sell 2 books, you know, right there. And then it goes on to say that, you know, talking about the protege, he has read this volume and is prepared to go through the steps. So I don't know about you guys. I couldn't read. Well, I could read, but I couldn't retain one sentence when I got sober. And so I don't care if they read the big book or not. What's important is for me to know the book, to carry that new guy through the book and show him how to recover from alcoholism. A little history on that big book and how very, very, very important it is. They had meetings in New York City. They had meetings in Akron, Ohio, but they weren't AA meetings. They were basically Bible studies, prayer meetings. It was the Oxford group, and some alcoholics went to that deal. So there was this maniac from Cleveland, Ohio, named Clarence Snyder. He's coming to Akron during this time. Oh, and also it was so slow and people kept getting drunk. And when they had an outline of the chapters to be written in the big book, and one of the chapters they were going to write was going to be on failures because they had so many failures. You know, just because the guy's doing great today, he may be drunk tomorrow. And you know, they couldn't figure this out. Something I didn't realize until I read this history. In the first edition big book, all the stories in the back, none of them had worked the 12 steps because there wasn't 12 steps before that. They talk about a 6-step program. There wasn't a 6-step program of the Oxford group. Some people said I did these 4 things, and some said I did these 6 things, but there really wasn't a 6-step program in the Oxford group, even though Earl Treat wrote the 6 things he did, the guy that started AA in Chicago. So they're getting drunk. The guy in the big book, Fred, they call him Fred. His name was Harry Brick. He was such a great member that they put him on the board of trustees for the Alcoholic Foundation, which is now the General Service Board. He drank. There was a guy named Hank Parkhurst that we probably would not have a big book if it weren't for him. He was so instrumental. Way more important than Dr. Bob in the beginning. But he kept putting the fire under Bill. Let's get this book written. Let's get it written. He did so much for AA. The book came out in April. He got drunk in September. That's why you don't ever hardly see his name in any of our history. He was written out of our history. But a lot of them got drunk. So I think on page 159 of the big book, when Bill tells that little history story where he went to Akron, the business deal fell through, he gets with Dr. Bob. They go meet AA number 3 in the hospital, and then along comes 2 more guys, and Bill went back to New York, in August, and he tells in there, he said that he left these 3 guys there, and he said in a year and 6 months later, these 3 succeeded with 7 more. So it took a year and a half before they had 10 members there in Akron. So 1940, October 1940, Bill has a meeting with Dr. Bob and those members in Akron, and he did what they call counting noses. And they had counted 40 sober members in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, this is roughly 3 years since Bill got sober, and there's only 40. So they write this book. Clarence Snyder's coming to Akron, and he's bringing some Catholic guys with him from Akron. Well, the Catholic bishop threatened those guys, said, hey, you're going down there mingling with those Protestants. They especially didn't like them doing a fifth step with us, because that's confession, and the Catholics require you do that with them. And the bishop said, you keep going down there, we're going to kick you out of the church. So Clarence comes to Akron, and he tells Dr. Bob, said, hey, we need to separate from this Oxford group and start our own deal. Now, Bill separated from the Oxford group in the spring of 1937. Dr. Bob and him held in there till December of 39. But he was telling Dr. Bob, we need to get away from these people. And Dr. Bob said, oh, no way. And so on the way home to Cleveland that night, Clarence and his guys stopped to have ice cream. And they came up with a solution. We'll just start our own meeting in Cleveland. So the book came out April 10th. So May the 10th, on a Wednesday night, they go back down to Cleveland. And to Akron. Clarence tells Dr. Bob, he said, hey, we've come up with a solution for this deal. Dr. Bob said, yeah, what is that? He said, we're starting our own meeting tomorrow night in Cleveland, and we're not having these Oxford group people tell us what to do. Here's one thing I wouldn't have liked either. So they would have this quiet time to get guidance from God. But I'm not getting guidance for me. I'm getting guidance for Sammy. And I tell Sammy, hey, this is what God wants you to do. And then they had what they call checking. I would check up and say, Sammy, did you do what God wanted you to do? And Bill didn't like it worth the crap. These amateur people that just got in contact with God telling him what he ought to do. Anyway, so Clarence said, we're starting our own deal, and it's going to be for Alcoholics Anonymous members and their families only. We're not having none of these outsiders. And so Dr. Bob said, you can't do that. He said, it's a done deal, and we're having our first meeting tomorrow night. And he made the mistake of giving them the address where that new meeting's going to be. So the next night when they're going to start the meeting, all the Akron bunch showed up there, and they were going to put a stop to it. And there was a bunch of cuss fights and almost came to blows. But the meeting went on through. So here's what Clarence did. Clarence used the book. And he got a little publicity going and got people coming in. And by using the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, I looked his history up. In a year's time, at the end of that year, they had 30 groups. They had 30 groups at the end of a year. That's the difference it made. These guys started staying sober because they're doing the work out of the book. That's why the book is so very important. I tell people, I'll give everybody here a challenge. You may read the book. I read the big book every day. But most of the time I read 2 pages. If I read 2 pages in the big book, I'm going to read the big book 4 times a year. The more I read it, the better sponsor I'm going to be. Because I want to be a better sponsor next year than I am now. One of the, I guess it's a myth, Shelley brought it up, our preamble. That was, like she said, it was written for outsiders from AA to tell them what AA is and what AA is not. That came out in 1947, and ever since then we've been stuck on this experience, strength, and hope, experience, strength, and hope. But before 1947, the only directive we had is on page 89. And it says, carry this message. And it's talking about this message in this book. So that's the message I need to be carrying. Now, so I'm going to share my experience, but if I waited till I was sober a year before I did an inventory, I'm not going to tell that, and you got to do that, because that's what I did. Because I don't want him to have my experience. I want him to do the work in the big book where he can have his own experience based on the program that's already there. So what I tell guys, here's my challenge. Start out at the beginning of the big book. Just read 2 pages a day, but don't read it to help you or to solve your problems or to change your wife like I did. That didn't work. She didn't need changing, matter of fact. But read the big book with one purpose, and that's to gain information to help that next alcoholic. I'm telling you, it reads completely different when I'm reading that. And on the bottom of page 14, it tells me how I grow spiritually, and that's through work and self-sacrifice for others. So if I'm reading the big book to gain information to help someone else, that's spiritual growth on my part, because I'm doing it to try to help someone else. Here's something else, and this is very directive. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to take any notes. If you're taking notes, this is all on paper. And when we get done here, if you're interested in a copy, I'll pull my phone up and I'll let you put your email address in and I'll send it to you. Anyway, so I told the guys, and this is directive in here because I was doing it for the guys I sponsor. So if it looks like, oh, he's telling me what to do. And by the way, this isn't the only way to do this either, I'm telling you guys. There's so many variations in sponsorship. This is just like maybe a basic blueprint that, I mean, you can free to do whatever you want to do with it. But anyway, I told the guys, and it's in here, if you read a meditation book in the morning, put it aside. Now that sounds horrible. Read the big book in place of it. Or if you have to read a morning meditation book, read it in addition to and not instead of the big book. Because this is the program I need to be carrying. Not something that, you know, Father Martin dreamed up that they printed out or dropped the rock or any of this other stuff. This is the main thing I should be reading if I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm going to carry this message. And that's how, never mind, I was about to give you an opinion. So really the main reason for me to sponsor anyone is to get them through the 12 steps, because I know, and if you've done them, you know, we don't recover from alcoholism until we've done the 12 steps. And I'm going to skim on through this stuff. So I'm going to set up a time for us to meet. I'm going to say, Jonathan, what's your schedule like? Well, I get off work at 4 o'clock tomorrow. Okay, let's meet at the AA hall at 5. Okay. If Jonathan doesn't show up, I'm going to give him one more shot. If he don't show up that second time, I'm going to tell him, go play with somebody else. Because I've literally had a guy die that I sponsored that I let him play around with AA. And me as the sponsor, I'm the one that's calling the shots in the sponsorship. I don't say, well, you know, if you think you can be there, would you like to meet at 5? You know, I'm the one that's got a lead here. And because they don't know what we're doing. If they did, they wouldn't be in AA. They'd have been doing it all along. So we sit down, and I'm going to qualify them. And like I told you, the big book was written to be mailed out. I'm not going to go through every single little bitty thing in the book. If we get to the part about the physical allergy, and he understands it, I'm not going on and harping on that over and over and over. I need him to know from the get-go, and if you differ with me, you're right, I'm wrong, but I am not powerless over people, places, and things. I can go home and I can change my wife by the way I treat her. You know, I can be a nasty husband, that's going to change her, or I can go home and do what a husband should do, that's going to make her have a better day. But I am not powerless when it comes to people, places, and things. Matter of fact, in the big book, it tells me how to directly deal with people, places, and things. What's weird, it doesn't tell me how to directly deal with alcoholism. What it does, it tells me to do this over here that's totally unrelated, and I'll recover from alcoholism. The craziest thing in the freaking world. So we're going to get together, and I picked this term up from the speaker you'll have next year, Chris. I'm going to qualify him in my mind. And we're not going to go to the title page. We're going to go to page 44, the first paragraph. And it says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, Or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. That's the physical allergy or physical craving and the mental obsession. If he can't quit entirely, I know he has a mental obsession. If he has little control over how much he drinks once he starts, I know he has a physical allergy. You know, and almost every single one without exception, I'll ask them those two questions, and they said, no, I can't control it, and no, I can't stay away from it. I've had a couple that they were in AA by mistake. They were drug addicts, and they could have a few drinks, and all they wanted to do is go to the dope house. They never craved alcohol once they started drinking. They always went to something else. I had a guy call me. He was a little confused, I guess, on the deal. Somebody in Odessa gave this guy my name. Said, you know, call Ricky. Like, he was tired of dealing with him, I think is what the deal was. So the guy called me, and we talked a little bit, and we get to this, and I'll say, can you quit drinking entirely? He said, oh, yeah. I said, why are you calling me? So we kind of talked about that a little bit. Then I said, now, once you start drinking, can you control how much you drink? He said, yeah. I said, once again, why are you calling me? You know, but he was a little confused on the deal. Most people, I never have to go any kind of explanation or get into the book any further than that as far as those two questions. So once he says, no, I can't control it, and no, I can't quit entirely, we're going to go to the title page of the big book. And y'all have heard this argument if you've been in AA a bunch of years. We don't ever recover. And then you have the people, oh, by God, we do. Well, I just go by what the book says. In the very title page of the big book, it says, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And then 16 other places in there it says recovered. One time it says recovering, but it's talking to the family. And it doesn't matter. To me, it's just do the work, no matter what you call it. So, but I'm going to let him know that we recover from alcoholism. I'll have him highlight that. My sponsor, he tells me, please sponsor, don't you highlight anything in that book, because all your attention will be focused on that. So, but I'm sober 4 years longer than my sponsor. I'll do what I want to do. Anyway, so once we do that, we go to the foreword to the first edition. And in the foreword to the first edition, it says, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. I have them highlight precisely. Then we go to page 20, and on page 20 it says, you may already be asking, what do I have to do to get over this? And it says, it is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. I have them highlight specifically. And then we go to page 29, and it says, further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recover. So it's clear-cut. And I have them highlight clear-cut. So I sum that up with them, that it is precise, it's specific, and it's clear-cut on how to recover from alcoholism. This book is not just a general guide that you pick up and, you know, like an owner's manual of a car when you can't find how to get the spare tire out, you know, you look it up. But it is actually a way to recover from alcoholism. So once we do that, it says, I think on page 94, if you're satisfied he is an alcoholic, dwell on the hopeless feature of alcoholism. So once I have that information that I believe he's alcoholic, he still don't know it. But once I believe he's alcoholic, we're going to go to the doctor's opinion on Roman numeral 28, where Dr. Silkworth says, we believe it's so suggested a few years ago that the action of alcohol in these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that this phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. See, my wife's a drinker. She has never, ever, 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 ever craved alcohol once she started. My history is, by the way, I love Louisiana. I have a Cajun food truck, by the way. I took my first drink in Grand Isle, Louisiana, and I was scared to death because my dad had, we know, over 25 DWIs. He went to prison 3 times. Like I told you, he died 51 years old. And I was running around with a guy that was 16. I was 14. And I'm in Cajun land. I felt different before I got down there, and I really felt different when I got there. And they were calling me Texian because I had that Texas accent. I just, I just didn't fit in. I wasn't good enough and all that. And this 16-year-old, he said, hey, why don't we go get something to drink? And I was really just curious. If I drink some of that, will it make me do what my dad did? Will I go home and beat my mother up and take a guitar and smash it through the window of the house and do stuff like that? But I was curious. I said, okay. So he gets us 2 bottles of what I've declared is the national first drink of Alcoholics Anonymous. Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill wine. And he gave me the bottle, and I drank the whole bottle. But I was amazed before I was halfway through. I began to know a new freedom and a new happiness. I comprehended the word serenity, and I knew peace. Fear of Cajuns left me. I'm telling you, and you know, y'all laugh at that because y'all recognize that as the 9-step promises. That's exactly what happened to me. Had you asked me, Ricky, how do you feel? I'm positive I wouldn't have given you those words, but that's exactly what happened to me. I had my first spiritual experience from the spirit alcohol. So my mind became obsessed from then on. I thought that's how I should always feel. Anyway, so my wife doesn't have the allergy. I do. You know, I thought about alcohol is the only substance that I know of that the craving happens after I pour it in. You know, any other substance I've done, I mean, I did it all out there. Like, you do crack cocaine, the high lasts real short and you start going down, then you crave it. You do opiates, you take, you know, whatever opiates, when you come down, then you crave it. Alcohol is a completely different animal. I obsess over a drink. I take a drink and the craving happens, and here's the craziest thing in the world for a guy like me. Before I have the full effects, the craving's on for the next one, you know. You know, actually the only substance I know like that, actually, is someone addicted to sugar. You know, they'll start, you know, they're going to eat just a little piece of their kid's birthday cake, and they'll eat the whole damn thing before the kid gets up out of bed, you know, because that craving kicks in. But that's what alcohol does for an alcoholic. But if I'm sitting there with Jonathan and we talk about this physical craving, and that's when I'm going to share some of my experience. I always talk about the Holiday Inn bar there in Jacksonville, the little town I'm in. Y'all know where Jacksonville is? You probably never will. People say Florida. It's a little small town. The population never changes. There's some young girl that gets pregnant and some young man leaves town. You know, so the population just stays right there, you know. But they had a bar in the Holiday Inn, and these guys would get off work at these factories at 5 o'clock, and they'd go in there, and they'd have a drink or two, and they'd go home, they'd mow the yard, and they'd eat supper with the family and play with the kids and enjoy the family. And I'm on my way home, and that's what I'm thinking I'm going to do, is do those things at home. And I thought, I'll stop in here and I'll have a beer, you know, and shoot the bull with the guys. And I go in there, and I order a beer, and it seems like 10 minutes has gone by and the lights are on. They're saying last call, and I'm still there sucking them down as fast as I can. And now I'm not going home because there's going to be a fight. And I did that over and over and over, but like 1 out of 50 times, I could stop in there and have 1 or 2 and go home. And my mind would tell me every time, well, you did it 49 times ago, you know. So, and Dr. Stiltworth talks about that. He said, this happens over and over, you know, and that's me. And he talks about, and this physical allergy, if you're new here, it's kind of a weird term, allergy. An allergy is merely an abnormal reaction to a substance harmless to most people. Like, I got a little sister that she can walk by 10 feet away from poison ivy and it gets all over her. You can rub it on me, I might itch a little bit, but that's it, you know. Now, I've heard people say that if they were allergic to poison ivy, they wouldn't go out there and get around it all the time. They're comparing it to alcoholism. Let me tell you something. If I was allergic to poison ivy and it gave me the relief that alcohol did, I'd think, yeah, maybe I won't get it too bad. Or if I'm allergic to something that might close my throat up, I'd probably carry me one of those EpiPens, you know, and go ahead and do it to get, you know, just. But anyway, and he says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. And I gave you that story, So I'm going to tell that story to Jonathan when we're sharing. That's my experience I'm going to tell him. And he's going to, in his mind, he's going to tell me some of the same things. If he's got what I've got, he's going to share with me some of the times that he was going to have just a few drinks and he ended up drunk. And on 21 it says, what about the real alcoholic? And basically it says that he may be a moderate drinker, may or not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some point in his drinking career, I love how we got a career in drinking, he says he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. And that's when, once we have trouble, I love the terminology, the words Bill uses. He talks about the desperate experiment of the first drink. See, when my wife goes to take a drink, it's not an experiment for her. She knows exactly what's going to happen. And it was, once I started having trouble, it was always an experiment with me. It's like, man, the last time I did this, I woke up in the Cherokee County Jail. I hope it don't happen this time, so here's how, Then we get into the mental obsession. James, I don't know what time I started. I'm going for 20. No, anyway, this is, basically this is a way really to get through the first few steps pretty quickly. It just doesn't take long. I'm going to get with him on the mental obsession, and talk about how no matter how many times I went to jail, if my wife told me, I'm divorcing you next time you drink, or the boss says I'm firing you, the day is coming where I'm going to take a drink. There's no doubt about it. All you got to do is look at my history, and I proved that over and over and over. And if I take a drink today, I'm just going to pick up on my history, only it's going to be more devastating than it was before. And then we get to the unmanageability, and this puzzled me for a long time, I finally saw it, I guess. And Glenda brought it up perfectly last night. The unmanageability to me is very, very simply the middle of page 52. It calls them the bedevilments. We're having trouble with personal relationships. We can't control our emotional nature. We're a prey to misery and depression. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. That's what every drunk that has hit bottom that comes to AA has, whether they show up, whether their butler dropped them off in a limousine, or if they rode a tricycle up here. That's what we all have. And it's not when we're drinking. That's how I am when I'm not drinking, that unmanageability. So, step one, I'm powerless over alcohol. I'm powerless over alcohol when I'm not drinking because of that mental obsession. I'm powerless over alcohol when I am drinking because of physical craving. And then I have this mental obsession or this insanity that I have that drives that causes me to take the first drink. And James, I'm going to finish with... Thank you, James. Well, it did speed me up. I got on through step one pretty quick. So, step two, came to believe that the power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So, step two I got kind of screwed up on this. And I don't know about you guys, but when I got here, I could complicate anything you gave me. And guess what I realized after kind of going through this? I can complicate sponsorship too. It can be very, very simple. So nothing can be done about that physical allergy. Absolutely nothing. So my problem, it says, is my insanity. The main problem centers in my mind, not in my body. If I never take a drink, I never have to worry about craving alcohol. So I've got this insanity, and I know you've heard people say, well, I asked God to remove the obsession, and it left. But I've seen those same people. Their wife walk out on them, they get fired, and they go straight to the liquor store. I have insanity. And it tells me, right in step 10, it says, by this time, sanity will have returned. It's not when I say this prayer. The insanity doesn't leave then. I may not obsess and be thinking about a drink all the time. So, lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we live, blah, 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 blah. And then its main object, the book, its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself which will solve your problem. Remember what the problem was? The insanity. That's the problem I need to have solved with this alcoholism. And guys, here's what blew me away. I was confused for years, kind of took it. It seemed to me like chapter 4, We Agnostics, was a way for a guy to come up with a new concept for God. But I kept reading it, I kept reading it. I said, it really doesn't make sense like that. And then I read a lot of the history. Now I read chapter 4. The only reason for chapter 4 is to convince the agnostic or the atheist to either believe or be willing to believe in God, period. It's not for the believer to change his concept of God. Anytime you read about choose your own concept of God in the big book, it's always talking to the agnostic or the atheist. Matter of fact, it says on 46, I believe, that our own concept, no matter how inadequate, is sufficient to begin. I had the Baptist God, well, it wasn't the Baptist God, it was the God, I was Baptist, and it's the concept I had, that he was up there, he was writing my name down and writing down everything I did wrong, and he was waiting to strike and do me. That's fine, because here's what I know, and what you know if you sponsor people, and what you know if you've done the steps. I don't care what somebody's concept of God is when they get here. If they do the work and the steps, it's going to change to something beautiful. And this dawned on me in a meeting not long ago. There's a friend of mine. He said, we all have a different concept of God. Ricky's got his, Jonathan's got his, Carter's got his. And he said, but we're all different. And it dawned on me in a way that's really not true. Because everyone I know that have taken these steps, their concept of God is an all-powerful, loving creator that wants to help them. And see, that's so simple for me in step 2. I asked Jonathan, you believe in God? Yes. Do you believe God can restore you to sanity? Yes. We're going to step 3. It's that simple. Now, if the guy doesn't believe in God, which I've sponsored everybody I could since I've been sober, and I've had, I think, one guy that said, no, I do not believe in God, then I've got to spend some more time with him, mainly in chapter 4. And I've got a little analogy that I think might push him over the edge. I was in the car wash equipment business for 29 years. And a car wash has lots of components. You got a timer, you got hoses, you got pumps, you got all this stuff. The most reliable component in a car wash system is a 3-horsepower electric motor. A 3-horsepower electric motor nowadays, they're designed by smart people with computers. The tolerances are just, I'm telling you, they're just almost perfect. And they'll last about 30,000 hours. Now, I got to get my calculator out. I'm 66 years old. Times 365 times 24 hours in a day. Oh, and that's if the motors run and you don't put it in harsh conditions and it's well maintained. Okay, I've got a brain, a heart, kidneys, lungs, liver, skin. I've got all these things that make up a human being. Has not been well maintained worth of crap, and has been in some very harsh conditions, and they've all been running for 578,160 hours. Do you think there might be something that created me? And if they say, yeah, it's not God, I don't care if you call it that or not. You call it the great human manufacturer if you want to. I don't care. They're going to come around to God eventually, So, anyway, once I get them through that second step, which I told is as simple as can be, then we go to step 3. And my sponsor did this to me, and it blew me. My third sponsor that changed my life because he used this book. I thought the guy was a genius for a few years, and I thought, man, he was a genius because those first 2 sponsors. My first one was anything that came along, go to a meeting, and hell, I ended up suicidal going to AA meetings. And, you know, I sound like I'm knocking the guy. I'm really not, because probably maybe 80 out of 100 guys he sponsored, they could do that, come in and just keep going to meetings, and I couldn't do it, man. My life kept getting worse and worse and worse. It was good in the meetings, but it went to hell when I left. And man, anyway, my third sponsor changed my life, and I'm thinking, man, he was a genius. And it dawned on me one day, he wasn't a genius. It was written down. He just took what was written down and went through here. So this sponsor, now what he did, he had me read the first 58 pages of the big book, with the foreword, the preface, the forewords, and the first 58 pages, the first 4 chapters. And then he went over those high points, and to make sure that I understood alcoholism, make sure I had it, and make sure, yes, I believed a prior grade in myself could restore me to sanity. And we go to how it works, and we get on page 60, and he said, I need to see if you're convinced of this. And he reads them out. He said, A, that you're alcoholic, can't manage your own life. Yes. B, that probably no human power could have relieved your alcoholism. Yes. C, that God could and would if he were sought. And I said, yes. And he looked at me and said, okay, you've done the first 2 steps. And I looked at him, as they say where I live, like a calf looking at a new gate. And I said, how do you know I've done the first 2 steps? I thought he was a mind reader or something. He said, read the next sentence. And the next sentence says, being convinced, we're at step 3. See, that's way too simple. I need some big, long diagram or you know, it's got to be something real complicated. That's the simplicity of Alcoholics Anonymous. So after that, though, it says, it talks about step 3, and it talks about this actor trying to be the director in the show. You guys have all read it. He tries to arrange everything, you know. He may be kind, considerate, generous, modest, self-sacrificing, or he may be mean, egotistical, on and on and on. I used all those tools, you know, especially with my wife. And here's an example. I might think, I want to buy a new boat. So I'd set the deal up. I might wash her car, clean the kitchen up real good, vacuum, do a lot of stuff, and then I'll spring it on her. And I'm real nice, and she said, oh, no, we don't need to do that. We got this other stuff coming up. Well, then I throw the mean egotistical on her. Look, I bust my butt out here every day for this family, but that's the kind of tools I use. But it goes through there, and it's basically talking about playing God. And I heard those old-timers talking about, yeah, I played God all the time. And I'm thinking, I never played God, but I didn't understand what they were saying. And on page 61, there's 3 main areas it talks about I play God. Controlling, that's attempting to control, and that's either verbally or in my mind. Complaining, either verbally or in my mind. And blaming, either verbally or in my mind. And I'll tell you, the quickest way Ricky Russell can get separated from God is when I get into politics. Because I'm separating myself from half the country, and I'm either resenting the guy in office, or I'm resenting the guy that's about to get in office. And guess who's a victim? Always, every single time. I'm the victim. And as my sponsor says, victims don't get recovery. So I leave that stuff to somebody else. And it's always something that I'm powerless over anyway. I can't go up there and switch out the president. Have no power. All I can do is vote once a year. We run with a bunch of guys. This little button here says East Texas Posse. There's a bunch of us that run together, and we go to conferences and stuff. And there'll be 6 of us in a truck, or 5 of us. Half the people in there think Donald Trump is the worst piece of crap that's ever been born in the world. And the other half of the people in that truck think he's the greatest human being that's ever been birthed. That is never brought up. And like Shelley mentioned, I think, I never want to wear anything in an AA meeting that might repel someone, because when he sees that hat I got on that's advertising some political or whatever, he may think, oh, that's what they're about. So I'm going to go out here and have another drink, But anyway, I don't know of another way to simplify that playing God other than go through the bottom of page 60, all of 61 and 62, and then I get to 63. And one thing I saw this not long ago, it says we have a new employer. He provided what we needed if we kept close to Him and performed His work well. Everybody's had a new job. If you go to a new job and all you do is stick close to the boss, what are they going to call you? A brown noser. Have you ever tried to brown nose God? I did. I just wanted to pray and get close to God and get close to God. But it says, stick close to God and perform His work well. What is His work for an AA member? It's to carry this message. It's to try to help another alcoholic. It's to try to be a giver. You know, so I didn't get anywhere when it was just me and God and me trying to play and just spending all my time trying to get closer to God. You know, I don't think He wants me doing that. I think He's way more interested in me helping His kids. And here's what happens. I sit down with Jonathan, and I see the tears come in Jonathan's eyes. I see the relief and see his eyes light up. There's not a time that I've ever felt closer to God than when that happens. And I've walked out of some bars, I'm telling you, feeling fantastic. It pales in comparison to that feeling I get when I know God has used me in some little small way that might have changed another guy's life, you know. And that's why, you know, I'm addicted to this deal. So the rest of these steps are in here. I usually go through them all. There's some really good stuff in here in the 10th and 11th step. And then one more challenge I'll give you. And I have the guys I sponsor do this. Just memorize the 11th step nightly review. When you go to bed, go through each one of those questions. Was I resentful? Was I selfish? Was I dishonest? Was I afraid? Do I owe an apology? Have I kept something to myself that should have been discussed with someone immediately? What does it say after that? Was I kind and loving toward all? What could I have done better? Was I thinking of myself most of the time? And here's the one thing, if you don't remember anything else, just this last sentence. It says, or was I thinking of others, of what I could pack into the stream of life? Because see, it appears to me that's God's will, is me seeing what I can pack into the stream of life. And that print in that book, it's not changing tomorrow. It's going to be the same tomorrow night when I lay down as it is tonight. So my job every day should be seeing what I could pack into the stream of life. Not go out there and see what I could do to help me. And for God knows, I don't know who brought it into AA, but that me trying to love myself, that's a recipe for suicide for Ricky Russell. What I need is what St. Francis of Assisi said in that 11th step prayer, in the 12 and 12. He said, it's by self-forgetting that one finds. You know, it's kind of funny to me. It says that we are an extreme example of self-will run right. So I'm going to love myself. You know, I damn near love myself to death. You know, I need, like I told you, I need self-forgetting. I need to go out there and do for you, not think of me. Do for my wife, not think of me. Do for my kids, not think of me. And that's when I get that deal from my kid. We want to raise our kids just like you raised us, you know. Where else does that happen, you know? I've never heard that before, you know. Anyway, as you can probably tell, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. And James, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for having me. Oh, and I'll be up here. If you'd like a copy of this, just give me your email address and I'll shoot it to you.
All right, thank you, Ricky. Real quick before we close with the Lord's Prayer, some quick announcements. At the merchandise table, they are running some hourly specials that are changing every hour, so go check out the merchandise table. And we're going to do the raffle around 7:45 tonight. Raffle tickets, they will stop selling at 6:45 on the dot. And remember, after the main speaker tonight, we're going to have trivia night in here. So I think what's trivia night? AA Trivia, where we play a game. AA Jeopardy. So let's, everybody, moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic. I want everybody stand up. We'll do the Lord's Prayer. Many alcoholics have said, Our Father,